Hey, good morning, everyone. So what do I got now? I've got a Dodge Grand Caravan with a 3.6, and it's got a severe oil leak. It's this one right here. And I happen to notice on top of the transmission here, see that there's oil all pooled up. And I noticed too, when he pulled into the parking lot, he made a right-hand turn to come in here, and that's where the oil stain starts. There's like a big flow of oil. What happens is the valley gets filled up with oil, and then it overflows, pours down on top of the tranny, and spills out on the ground. What the problem is on this one, now I've already checked the gasket. There's the filter. I already checked the gasket of the filter. It seems okay. It's actually an O-ring. Whoever did the oil change last did change it. But what happens is these housings get distorted over time, and that's what creates the leak. Now this is an oil cooler as well as an oil filter housing. So I have to take the intake off, upper and lower, to gain access to this. Once I gain access to this, then I can take it out. And once I get down in there, you'll be able to see, I'll show you everything, you'll be able to see how the valley just gets filled with oil. And like I said, it acts like a dam, and then it overflows and usually winds up on top of the transmission. It's a sort of common issue, especially when you get people that animalize that housing when they tighten up the filter. So let's get going. Let's get the intake off. There's two brackets in the front here. You can just see the 10 millimeter there. There's one there and there's one there. Got to take those off, and there's a bunch of 8 millimeter intake bolts there. Got to take those off. Got to take the snorkel out, and then there's a bracket down on this side here. It's kind of hard to see. You can just see the edge of it. There's 10 millimeter here. There's another one right here. And what you got to do is the 13 millimeter bolt down at the bottom, or nut, I don't remember off the top of my head. You got to take that out so this bracket comes loose. Because getting these bolts out are a pain in the neck for these two brackets. But if you take that bracket out, what you can do is you can lift the intake up like this, and then push it backwards to release those two front ones, and then pull this up and out of the way. So let me get going with that. Let me get this going, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So there we go. I got those 10 millimeter nuts out in front there. I got all of the 8 millimeter bolts that hold the intake down in place off. Now here's that bracket in the back, and if you look close, I got the 10 off there, the 10 off there, and there's a 13 stud bolt down here. So you take that out like that, and you want to take this bracket off because you need it out of the way. Because it's easier doing that than it is to fight with those two brackets that are down there that are actually attached to the exhaust. They're kind of a nightmare. Actually, not the exhaust, they're attached to the head. So now, like I said, you can tip the intake up like that and pull it up and out. Now a little tip, when you go to reinstall this, all the intake bolts, if you could take them and you pull them up, I already did it on a few, on the ones I can grab when it was in the car. You pull them up and you actually turn it so the threads catch at the top of the intake. This way they're not protruding like those are. Because if they're protruding, you're fighting with the intake to try to get it back in place. But at least if they're up and sitting like that, you can get the intake back in place relatively easy. So now, let me just put this down. So now, take that off of there. I can get the lower intake out. The lower intake, same thing, 8 millimeters. Got some wiring for the injectors. Got to take that off. You don't have to take the rail off. The rail will come off with the intake, and the injectors go into the intake itself. So, yeah, we got to take the wiring off, like I said. Got to take the fuel rail off, like I said, and the wiring hooks up in a couple of different places. So let's get all of that off so we can get the lower intake out. So there we go, got the harness out of the way, and I actually unclip it from the valve cover just to give myself more room. And in the front, I disconnect everything and move it just to have more room in the front here. Also, stuff rags or something down the intake and then blow around with compressed air to get any loose debris, sand, whatever that might be collected around there. Now, you notice when I took the upper intake off, which is right there, I had it upside down. Not a good thing. I thought about it after I put it down there. Flip it over, this way nothing falls inside of it. Something falls inside of it, like let's say a nut, anything could fall inside of it and you not realize it. You put the intake on and all of a sudden whatever it is gets sucked into the motor, you can destroy the motor. So if you have no control over it and you're worried about it, like if you're going to store it somewhere and you have other people around, stuff rags in the holes just to prevent stuff from getting in there, even in the throttle body end. So, and if you were going to leave this thing overnight or whatever, do this too, because you never know. You can get a mouse or something coming in and putting something inside the motor. You never know. Something could fall in there. Something from across the shop could get shot out from somebody doing something, and it could land in there. You never know. So anyway, now I just got to take those 8s out that hold the intake actually in place. There. So let me do all of that, and then let's get the intake off. Got all the bolts loose, so now this should come right out. It's just a plastic intake, so it's got O-rings for gaskets. There you go. See that? So now, if you look down, yeah, I think that housing must have a crack in it or something somewhere for it to spray oil all over the place like that. So let me, you see it down there? It's just all pooled up. Another thing too is the oil pressure sensors down there. Oil pressure temperature and oil pressure. I believe that's what that is. Oil pressure is the bottom one. I believe that's oil temperature sensor on the top. I've gone to replace the pressure sensor, and as you can see by looking in there, that's a brass fitting that's basically molded into the plastic. I've had it to where the brass fitting starts to spin, and you can actually see it protruding on the bottom one there a little bit. I've had it where it starts to spin, and then you got to replace the whole housing anyway. So a lot of times it's actually worth it just to go ahead and replace the entire darn thing, especially on a higher mileage vehicle. So, and I mean, it didn't really take that much to get the intake off. Now, if I was going to be messing around with this thing more than what I'm doing, actually no, let me rephrase that. Now, because I'm messing around with everything in here, I'm going to stuff rags down in the holes just to be safe, because like I said, I don't want stuff to fall down inside there. Now I got the connectors unclipped from the sensors over there, and we have, those are inverted Torxes. So there's one there, see that one? One there, one there, one there, and one there. So now I got to take all of those out. Whenever you're doing this job, you're going to have to change the oil when you're done, because you will get coolant into the oil. Let's see. So once I get this unbolted up and out, then I can actually unhook that hose down there. It's kind of a pain to unhook that hose right now. So let me get that unbolted and up and out so I can get the hose undone. Alright, so now that's unbolted, and once I start moving this and the seals actually completely break free, you're going to see coolant leak out, at least usually. So sometimes it's a pain to get it going. Come on, baby. Come on out of there. There it goes. You hear it? That's oil, it's coolant. So now it's coming up and out, and now I can get that hose off. I hooked my suction device up to that too, to help pull out anything that's down inside there while I'm pulling this up, because as you can see, it started to overflow already and go down top of the tranny. So now, like I said, as soon as that gets up as much as it can for right now, I'm going to get this up and then pull that hose off. And now with that out of the way, you can see all the debris and everything else that's in there. You see the 2 coolant ports there, and then you have the oil ports there and there. Now, I'm using my sucker device, which is an excellent thing to have, and I'm going to suck out basically all the fluids that's caught up in any of the holes here. Then also, I'm going to go down inside those return holes to pull anything out that I can possibly get out. You see there's a bunch of debris there. That's the pressure port, if I'm not mistaken. So I got to make sure I get all of that out. I don't want to like blow it out or anything like that, and I certainly don't want to push on it. So I want to get that out as gingerly as possible, because I just don't want it to go down in the hole there. Now remember what I said about changing the oil pressure switch, how that brass insert could spin? Well, check this out. Because I was going to get a new oil pressure switch, and the oil temperature switch here, I was going to change it over. However, let me see if I can focus in on this. Oops, if you look close, see that? The whole thing's turning. See it? And I've seen it happen with the oil pressure switch in the past. but I've never seen it on the oil temperature sensor. So now I'm going to have to get two of them. So it is what it is. What am I going to do? Alright. Alright, so here we go. This is the new housing that's going in place. And it's an all aluminum design. It's aftermarket. I don't even know who makes it. I got to look real quick. Just out of curiosity. Is this Dorman? Oh yeah, it is. It's a Dorman. Okay. It's a nice kit because it comes with everything. It comes with intake gaskets and whatnot too. And it's got a disclaimer on here. Basically, it's saying that this is a 2015 style housing because of the filter. The filter's a different style filter. It looks relatively the same. It's the same type of element. However, at the bottom of the medium of the element is like a almost looks like I don't know, like a tower with an O-ring on it that sticks down into the bottom. I don't understand the reason for the change, but that's what they did. And you can interchange the actual housing. So even if you got a factory Chrysler housing, you can interchange them. I'd rather use the newer design, obviously, because there's a reason they changed it. No idea why. But I got everything cleaned off in there. So everything's ready to go back on. I'm not going to go nuts. I don't have a shop vac that I'm willing to get dirty and oily, so I'm not going to do that. So now this basically drops down in place, and I got to catch that hose. And once I catch that, then I can insert it down in place. As you see, I got tranny gel on there because there's an O-ring there that slips down inside. And all the other ones have like O-rings that basically bottom out. They're not really O-rings, they're just like seals that push in place. So they basically fit on a flat surface. So let me get this in place and I'll show you what that looks like once it's installed. So there we go. I also got new oil pressure and oil temperature sensors that have to go in place. So that's all bolted in. It's right where it needs to be. Let's see, anything else special? Nope. So I'm going to get these two sensors in. I'm going to get the wiring on there, and then I'm going to clean up the head surface where the intake has to lay. So there we go. We've got the mounting surface cleaned up. I cleaned up this mounting surface here, put the new O-ring gaskets in place. So now we're going to lay the intake in place. Remember what I told you? You can screw the screws out a little bit so they don't fall in and hang in as you're laying it in place. Especially the upper. The upper is the more important one. The lower one really doesn't matter all that much. It just saves you some aggravation because these things can catch and hang up in different spots when you're trying to lay it in place. So that's all together. The fuel line's on, all the electrical connectors are in place, the retainers are back in place, and let's see, that's it. I cleaned off the gasket surface, got the O-rings in place, and don't forget, put the silencer pad in place right there. And so now we can stick the intake on. Now remember what I said, take the intake bolts and have them sticking up like that when you drop it in place. That'll just save you a lot of aggravation. Now as you're dropping the intake in place, just make sure those front studs go down and through those brackets. So basically you're going to lay it in place, slide it backwards into those brackets, and then into place on the intake manifold. I don't think I could show you that because I don't have a way of doing that. So there it is, laid in place. You can see the studs are in place, and now you can tighten up the intake bolts. So now we're going to install this bracket. Remember, this bracket goes back here. Don't forget to install it. It does make a difference. Oh, come on, get in place. There we go. Come on, it's fighting me. It's fighting me because of the harness down below there. There we go. Now I can catch the nuts in place and get that and catch the nuts there. Whenever you torque intake manifolds like this, when you're going from a plastic intake to a plastic intake, make sure you follow the torque diagram and procedure. Make sure you don't over torque them. If you're only going into plastic, you can strip them out very easy. Okay, let's get all of this on, get the vacuum hoses on, and yeah, go from there. I've seen a lot of people have problems putting this connector back in place on the throttle body itself. And because what happens is you try to click it in and it just does not want to go. The easiest thing to do, spray it with WD-40. Just spray it with WD-40 or silicone spray, something along those lines. It's actually good for the connections and it'll snap right in place. Because otherwise, I've seen a lot of people fight with these things. But just doing that, it'll make it go right in place. So there we go. All of that's assembled. So now, before I start this thing up, I'm actually going to drain the oil out of it. I do have the coolant filled up there, and it's burping out air slowly. So what I'm going to do is see. A lot of times it gets stuck in this upper hose because the upper hose kind of raises right here a little bit. But anyway, I'm going to drain the oil, and when I come back down with it, hopefully that thing will be burped out enough, and I can put a radiator cap back on it, and then I can put the engine cover back on it. But that's it, yeah. And yeah, the filter's inside there. I did verify that. So yeah, so everything's good. Let's just dump the oil and see how she runs. All right, so I got oil in it. Coolant's topped off. Everything's on and tight. I double checked everything. Drain plug's tight. All the hoses are on. Brackets are on. You name it. So let's start it up and see what she sounds like. They did run this thing low on oil, so hopefully they didn't damage anything. And it's got 158,000. Okay, that sounds pretty good. Got a little ticky lifter there, or a rocker arm or something. That might ease up as it warms up. We'll see what happens. Now I'm gonna have to look down there with a flashlight and make sure everything's good, because I can't see down there. Camera. I think it's gonna be okay. I can see the transmission assembly gel right there, so that'll melt away. But other than that, I think everything's a success. Okay. If you're getting anything out of my videos, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. That's it for now. Have a great day. Keep wrenching.